This episode's made possible by Planful.
This is Anna King, CFO of Mesh Payments, and you're listening to CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 940.
And we saw an equity capital market that was willing to reward the kind of business that we were. And we said that won't exist forever. That is a thing that comes and goes. So we're going to go public, but only if we can do it quickly. And we called the banks in July and said, help us put together the IPO process. And they're like, okay, cool, we can start now. We'll list you next June or something like that. And I'm like, no, we want to get out before the election. They took a big breath and they're like, that's not possible. And the mindset that we took on the team was like, we need to go now because the equity capital markets are telling the market something. They're telling us that the kind of business that we are is going to get funding. You can't control where the market's at in its cycle. That's a thing that is the environment you're operating in. What you can control is how you choose to engage with it.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's episode, we speak with CFO Michael Linford of Affirm. For those executives residing inside the private equity and investment banking realm that aspire to someday occupy the CFO office, it's not uncommon to first jump in to an operations role. Once inside the business, the goal is to canvass the corridors and collaborate with the functional areas and managers the banking world seldom sees. Michael Linford made the jump and landed inside Hewlett-Packard in 2015, just in time to help the tech giant achieve its historic spin-out, a feat that would supply Linford with more than enough operational insights to launch a CFO career. You'll hear that story and much more after this.
Hi, I'm Rowan Tonkin, Chief Marketing Officer at Planful, and we're a proud sponsor of CFO Thought Leader. At Planful, we're empowering teams just like yours to drive peak financial performance in every corner of your business. What sets Planful apart? We have purpose-built applications for every department, from FP&A to accounting, marketing to HR, all with built-in financial intelligence. This means we can get you up and running within weeks, and it requires minimal IT involvement. So you can rapidly and seamlessly engage everyone across the business in your key financial processes. Best of all, you can't outgrow us. We take the pain of growing away with an unmatched ability to scale with you. You have an endless runway with Planful. See why over 1,300 customers around the world choose Planful as their flexible, user-friendly, end-to-end financial performance management platform. Go to planful.com and see how you can make financial performance a team sport in your business.
Hello, we're speaking with Michael Linford, CFO of Affirm. Michael, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, Michael, as always, we're going to ask you to look back. We're wondering what those experiences are that you feel prepared you to become a finance leader. What would those be?
Yeah, my path to being a finance leader is probably not all that common amongst other CFOs. I actually studied mechanical engineering at the University of Texas. And there I was drawn to just hard problems. We were, when you go to a university like Texas that's so big, there were 55,000 students when I was there. The kind of opportunities you have to work on really gnarly problems is pretty limitless. And I for one, worked on a project to build a satellite. And so a bunch of students put a satellite in space. And it was the first time in my life where I went from thinking that I was just going to be doing things for other people, having a good job, working at a deli, to where I actually had a chance to do something to influence the world. I got the courage to go out and be pretty confident what I could do. And then I got an opportunity to interview with McKinsey & Company as an undergrad. And to be perfectly candid, I didn't know who they were. I was an engineer who had spent my time at ExxonMobil, and I get this interview offer, and I call my brother, and I say to him, who's McKinsey and why do they want to talk to me? And he explained to me that I would be silly not to at least have the conversation. And in that conversation, I got really drawn into the problem solving aspects of what McKinsey and management consulting would do. Spent a few years there and got the itch to be more of an operator. I think most consultants eventually want to grow out of that and start to do a little bit. And was pulled into private equity. At the time, KKR was building a team of former management consultants to help them operate the assets they were buying. And that's where I really learned business and value creation. The group of people I worked with there are some of, if not the brightest human beings on the planet, hardworking, brilliant, kind people who created a tremendous amount of value for our LPs. And I loved that. And I made a really hard decision after being there for a little under a decade that I still wanted to operate more directly, that I still felt like I was too far away from actually operating assets. And after a little bit of time at HP helping the business get restructured and set right, I found my way to being the CFO of the software business there. And that was my first opportunity to actually have a CFO role. And the objective there was for a company that was much later in its life cycle, and we did everything we could to put it in the best possible state. When I left that, it was really important to me to go find something that was a new challenge, another hard problem. And, I found my way to Affirm because of the difficult problem that we were trying to solve. The mission at Affirm is so core to what we do, and it's kind of audacious. And that really attracted me to say, enabled me to say, I want to go try that. I want to go try to do something so bold as to, take a mission like improving lives in the context of financial services. And was drawn there. And fortunately, I found a founder in Max who was really open to the kind of problem solving skills. And like him, I was drawn to the difficulty of the problem, and found a good partner in being his right hand.
Want to thank you. Nice overview for us. I want to point out to the listeners that at KKR, you invested 6 years, and in
HP, it was how many years?
Closer to 8 years. 8 years at KKR and about 4 years at HP.
Okay, but thank you for that. So, as you sat across the table from CEOs and COOs, do you recall there was a time or a management team that impressed you, and you said, wow, I really enjoy being part of what they're attempting to do? I mean, was it that simple, or?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I'm definitely not one of those people who's had a predetermined career path. Like I've never sat down and said, I know what I want to be. What I've tried to do is just be very open-minded to where I'm at in my life and have an attitude of opportunities are going to present themselves, and it's my job to make sure, to be in a position to be able to take advantage of them when they come up. And I'm not, there's both are good ways to run a career. I mean, you can choose to have a North Star and work really hard to achieve a specific goal. For me, it was always more important that I was working on a problem that I thought was important, that I was able to contribute and to actually, again, to do something that could change the world. And I think it's a really bold and kind of, ambitious statement, but that mattered most to me. And what I found in my time at KKR and since is that the role of finance in both the strategy of a company and the role of finance in investment prioritization and operational discipline and rigor, and the role of finance in helping people who have strong visions like founders see them to life is really important. It's a critical piece of all those things. I take a strong view and bent towards value creation because in an efficient capital markets, companies that create value get the latitude to change the world and build the business, and companies that don't. And so when you bring that mindset of value creation into a company early, it really does unlock a lot. When I was at KKR, we would work with companies like Dollar General, and we were looking at a business that was, a truly great business that had had fallen a little bit off its trajectory and path. And the opportunity to focus on fixing the business and then letting it scale substantially after you fix it was a real key moment for me when I saw the idea of, really great businesses can be in a bad moment with a little bit of focus and discipline and rigor, they can become great businesses again. And, when I was at HP later on, I was dealing with a set of businesses that were much later in their life cycle. These were not early stage businesses. These were mature businesses. But very similarly, with the right focus, you can create a lot of value for the shareholder. At HP, that looked like separating out the things that were together that really weren't adding value by being together. At Affirm, it's very different. I joined the company when we were 400 employees, and we're about 2,600 now. And it's been one of scaling the business as we keep value creation in our mindset. And the thing is, whether you're working on a business like Dollar General, which is a retailer that had fallen off its trajectory, or a late life cycle old software company like Hewlett Packard, or Affirm, if you take the similar toolkits and say, these are all problems that I'm going to solve, and I'm going to take an eye towards how I can create value for the shareholders and all the constituents in the business, the employees, the customers, and you have that mindset front and center, you could do a lot of good. And that's why I talk about my experiences being not all that common, because the diversity of industries I've worked with and the diversity of backgrounds just isn't, it's not quite as linear as I think some CFOs see.
So I'd love to just sort of zero in on the segues, and I'm trying to think. You had other opportunities clearly, but you went to HP. What was the appeal or the attraction? What was it that HP had that you were like, yes?
It's on a list of things that I think I talk to people early in their career about. As I mentioned before, I try to be very open-minded, and when opportunities arise, I try to take advantage of them where they're good. And this opportunity arose because of a leader of mine at KKR had gone to HP, and Meg Whitman had hired him over to really help her think about the business and the challenge that she was facing, which was this massive institution, which was Hewlett Packard, that definitely needed some change. And I believe very strongly that you get to pick who you work for in your life. And you may not get to make the decisions at the company, but you always get to pick who you work for. And if you wake up every day and don't like the people you're working for, you should change that. And the flip side is, when you get to work with great people on hard problems, the rest of it is kind of, details that don't really matter as much. And so Chris Hsu, who's the leader I followed over to HP, was there. And he's on that list of people who I consider to be extremely important in shaping who I was. He and I worked together early at KKR and for a long time, and built this really good relationship. And so when he called, there really wasn't much of a debate. I was going to go follow him there.
Now, I know at HP you were involved a good deal in M&A and the integration of acquired companies. Can you give us some, and again, I'm not saying you spearheaded these deals, but given the time you were there, how many acquisitions do you expect to were you part of or involved in some way?
Yeah, so the time that I was at HP was a real interesting time for the business. It was as an institution that had been 3 different businesses that kind of been pushed together. They had a hardware business, which today we know is Hewlett Packard Enterprise, which largely made servers and equipment for the largest enterprises. It had enterprise services, which was the old Ross Perot EDS business, which is now part of a company called DXC. It's an IT outsourcing company. And I'm not doing these businesses justice. They're a lot more than these things, but just trying to keep them very simple. And then it had a software business. And we had made the decision. That was just the Hewlett Packard Enterprise business. There was also Hewlett Packard Consumer business, which was printers and inks and laptops that I think a lot of folks are pretty familiar with. And when I joined, the decision to separate the enterprise and consumer business was underway. And so this was a business that was a massive thing that was already being split into 2 pieces, with an eye towards on the enterprise side what they were going to do to continue to break it up. And that's because the pieces we thought added more value to the shareholder separate and maybe combined with other entities than as one kind of enterprise technology company. And so we made the decision to split them up. And so while that was going on, though, we knew that we couldn't stop building the businesses, right? We had to continue to grow an enterprise business, and we would make acquisitions in the hardware domain. When I had joined after the company had bought a networking company that today is a material part of what they do, and it was a classic example of an integration that had stumbled. So they bought a business. It was a really good business that was growing really fast, and it kind of came into this mothership and had stalled. And so we spent a lot of time early getting that piece right, again, while the other things were going on, right? So in a business that large, there's so many moving parts, and it's a really complicated landscape to be in. And you have to be able to continue to add value, integrate the things you're buying, continue to build a real business while you're shedding things on the side that are completely away from it. And there's a duality to that. There's a tension that's very real. You're not just buying or just selling. Businesses have to think about doing both at the same time if they have to make change, right? And that business was a business that needed change, and so they needed to continue to build and add while they were, taking pieces of their business that weren't additive to the whole and moving them away. And so it was really interesting. The pace of M&A didn't slow down, but it was happening in a very different context where getting the highest level of the company focused on integration was actually quite challenging, because as you can imagine, the distraction factor was very real because they were in the midst of these separations. And yet, strategically, if you didn't focus on getting the value out of the acquisitions you had made, the thing that's left over wouldn't have any value left.
So during your years there, again, you were in a CFO role as well as participating in M&A. I think it happened in tandem.
You wore both hats, or no?
Yeah, it was a little more distinct, but I was always working for Chris, the leader I followed there. He was he's the definition of a change agent. He is somebody you bring in when you want to drive change, and he was certainly doing a lot of that at Hewlett Packard. And we were in the process of selling our software business, and the software business was definitely struggling. It was not a high performing business. It had a lot of potential, but it was not performing anywhere near where we thought it could. And we were in the process of selling it, and that process was less than perfect. When you're selling a business that isn't clicking on all cylinders, it can be a difficult process. But as part of that process, we moved Chris actually in to run the business there at HP, and Chris pulled me over to be his CFO. And so at that point, we stopped the work on integration. We were doing work on a lot of the separation related work, negotiating these large TSAs with the businesses that we were spinning out. We wrapped that up and then moved over and focused most of our effort on getting the software business ready for separation from the company. And I'll tell you, that is the one of the hardest problems I've ever had to solve in my career, because again, you have to take a step back. We have this mega company in Hewlett Packard. The first thing you do is you separate the consumer business, and then you separate the services business. And then what's left is a hardware and software business. And so you want to separate the software business. At every one of those separations, all the corporate functions are being rated for talent, and you're shrinking the envelope, and you're shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And by the time we got to the software business separation, there was nothing left in the cupboard. And so we had to separate out from Hewlett Packard Enterprise. We had to stand up a whole new technology stack to operate the business on. And we had to hire a whole new team because there was nobody left in the corporate functions to support this spun out entity. And so we in rapid succession, we stood up a new IT stack. We hired a global finance organization that did not exist going into the separation. And we had to operate a business because while we were under a deal to sell, we had to perform in order to ensure that the sale process would go well. and it's really difficult to do one of those things. It's really borderline impossible to do all of them at the same time and keep the team focused on the job at hand, because I don't care how mature you are as a leader or as an operator in a business, you're going to get distracted with how these corporate moves impact you personally. And so staying focused on the job at hand while all that change is happening around you is a tremendous people and leadership challenge, alongside the technical, operational, and finance challenges that were very real for us.
The next segue, of course, is to Affirm. And here too, you had other, you probably evaluated a number of different opportunities. Some you turned down and it wasn't time to leave yet. You had work still to do, perhaps. Don't know. But when you did make the decision, what was the criteria? Do you recall? And again, we're looking for that advice for other, future finance leaders, perhaps, who sometimes it's a tough call. This one might not have been.
No, this one was very hard for me. When I first took the call from a recruiter, at the time, my wife was a senior executive at Southwest Airlines, and we were living in Dallas and just had our second kid. And we were in a position where we kind of felt like we needed a break. we needed to take a breath, because I'd had a pretty long sprint. So I got the call from the recruiter, and he gave me the spiel that all the recruiters do, and my quick reaction was, no thanks, I'm good. and then he's like, well, will you at least have a conversation with Max? And there is, again, a piece of advice I give folks is when somebody as influential, as impactful to the world as someone like my boss Max is, if they want to spend 30 minutes with you, you say yes, and you take that conversation. And I came into it admittedly very biased against wanting to I felt tired. I didn't feel like I was up for the right mindset for going and tackling a big new challenge. I wanted to take a breath, and I immediately fell for what we were trying to do. The mission at Affirm is special and unique, and it's not constrained. It's not like anything you'd see in most other enterprises. We build honest financial products that improve lives. And that's what we're up to.
I should just come out and segue to our business segment and just say, tell us about this company. What does Affirm do? What are its offerings about?
Sorry for front running that. So Affirm's mission is to build honest financial product that improve lives. We're a payment network that helps consumers purchase the things they want and need, and we help merchants grow their businesses. Many people, especially millennial and Gen Z consumers, are not happy with the choices they have for their existing credit products. They do not want to be revolving on credit cards. They do not want the ball and chain that comes with compounding debt. And with Affirm, they don't have to. We have never charged late fees. We don't compound interest on interest. We give consumers immutable certainty of the cost of financing when they check out. We can bring 0% as well as interest-bearing products to help merchants offer a differentiated set of financing offers to their consumers. And all of this is with an eye towards attacking what we think is a lot of areas of potential future benefit for consumers and harm that happens today, where consumers do fall into a lot of traps. I grew up. I have 9 siblings. I grew up as one of 10 people, and I like to tell folks that I don't care how wealthy you are. Financially caring for 10 human beings is something that will put an incredible amount of stress on your financial life. And so for me, growing up, there was always a constraint on even access to credit. And my parents were certainly not immune from those who fall into the spiral of never-ending credit card debt. And I saw what Max was building, and I said, this is going to be something that has the opportunity to change the world. And that was my criteria to answer your question. I did not want to work. If I was going to get out of bed, I was going to stop my 4 times a week running routine and going to the gym. If I was going to do all that, I wanted it to be on something that I thought had a good chance of changing the world. And with that, audacious statement, which is truly, it's a lot of audacity to say you want to get out of bed and change the world. I wanted to do it somewhere that I thought was going to do it responsibly. And the combination of financial services, technology, solving a real problem for consumers, to never charge late fees, and then to position yourselves with real principles. We like to say that we will never profit off of a consumer's misfortune or mistake. What that means for us is we won't set ourselves up to win if the consumer fails. And that has it drives all the way down to how we make decisions on credit, for example. A financial institution might be okay extending credit to a consumer who isn't likely to pay back because they can charge late fees. They're happy for that interest to start to clip and compound. And because we've taken away all of those hacks that I think a lot of the financial services industry has used, we have to operate really carefully, and we never extend credit where we don't think folks can pay us back. And that discipline is only possible if you bring a lot of technology to bear. And so, we're out to really improve the provision of credit in our economy. We're out to make consumers be able to still access credit, which we think is a good thing, and help merchants grow their businesses, but to do so in a way that's good for the consumer, and to really improve their lives.
So you joined in 2018, and forgive me, I don't have it in front of me. When did the company go public? Was it before you arrived, or what was that?
No. The company went public in early 2021, and when I have an awful lot of personal insecurity, as I'm sure a lot of CFOs who you talk to share. And one of my pieces of insecurity when I was joining the company, I had a conversation with Max very explicitly, and I said that you're going to want to take this company public, and you should. It's going to be a great business. But I've never been a public company CFO. I've never taken a company public. That's just not a thing. You're supposed to go hire somebody with a lot of gray hair and has done it before. And I'm happy when you get to that moment. Don't be offended. I won't be offended at all. Just go hire the other person. And that wasn't how it played out. But yeah, we took the company public a couple years after I joined, in the midst of COVID, in the midst of a lot of political change, as you may recall. In January 2021 was when Biden was being sworn in, or the votes were being counted, and all of the political swirl that was happening there. That was the context and backdrop with which we went public.
Did the conversations with investors, was that whole experience anything different than you had believed it would be? I don't think so. I think you're familiar, you've examined.
Yeah, it was definitely the most intense 6 months of my life. I like to joke around with people that I'm so glad I did it, because it is a career moment, but I'll never do it again, because it was pretty intense, and especially because of the nature of how we did it. But I mentioned before about being drawn to really hard problems, and like this is another one. When it came up, it was like, this is going to be really, really hard. But for me, that's what will get me out of bed, get me very energized on just how difficult that problem is going to be. The question we never asked ourselves is, can we? We're going to go do it. Let's go figure this out. And it was a really cool experience. My background in private equity was actually really helpful here, because I think when we have such a strong technology orientation at Affirm, founders like Max, or our president, Libor, are both very credible, and well, they're geniuses, and they're very credible in the context of technology companies. And to bring a little bit of perspective on value creation to the conversation, I thought definitely helped complement the conversation with shareholders. But we figured most of it out as we were going. We did not get into it thinking that we were going to have all of the answers before we started the work. We knew it was going to be hard, and we jumped in and we did it. And yeah, you mentioned the virtual roadshow. A fun fact that I like to tell people is that we did the entire IPO from the moment we decided to go public until the day we started trading. And Max and I were never in the same room. He was remote and I was remote. The entire thing happened over Zoom.
Can I ask? I mean, did you hire a top IR individual? Was there somebody that you added to the team under the circumstances? Yeah.
We had to add a lot of folks to the team. And one of the many lessons I learned, which I could literally write a book about how not to do it. Certainly learned all those lessons. But one of the lessons I learned was just there are certain roles that are actually really hard to hire for. And IR is one of them, because good IR professionals won't leave their companies quickly and suddenly. And so you actually need quite a long runway. So we actually didn't have a full-time IR professional until after we had gone public. We brought on an IR leader and, continued to advance it. We had done a lot of IR work at Affirm before. When I joined the company, again, full of excitement and idealism for how we're going to change the world. And I show up and our finance team was really small. I think we had about 4 people in strategic finance, a handful of people in accounting, and a handful of people in capital markets when I joined. And one of the strategic finance analysts pulled me aside like the day I joined. And he tells me, he's like, we're gonna run out of money. I was like, yeah, I know. We're a loss-making company. We always have to be raising a little bit. He's like, no, it's like soon. We have like 3 months. We got to figure this out. And so I walk into Max's, office, not really office. I walk by his where he was sitting, and we decide that we were gonna begin the work, and be very aware of when we actually had to raise money, but begin the work then. And it's not an exaggeration. From the day I joined in 2018 until the day we went public, we were always raising money. In fact, we did our last private financing in the summertime, just before we filed our S1. And so there was a constant state of raising money. And I think this is a really common theme amongst private company CFOs I've talked to. Unless you have a substantial amount of cash flow, which some do, but most don't, you're always working on raising capital for the business. And in a business like ours, which was definitely not profitable when we were private, we had an eye towards raising capital all the time. So we had a lot of the investor pieces in place, but obviously none in the context of public companies. Like private company IR is so easy to do. Public company IR is a whole different game. And we had to build that capability. We obviously had to build capabilities around internal controls and SOX compliance that were non-existent at the firm. We had to get better at financial planning and analysis. We had to get better at our accounting team and just time to close, all of the stuff that you want to work on as a private company, but gets deprioritized and down the list. They became burning platforms for us that we really had to go out and address immediately. But in a way, it's really positive, right? It's like anything else in life. Sometimes when the forcing function is you don't have a choice, all of the excuses go out the door, and you just go put it in place and get it right.
We're interested what you set out to do maybe with the finance team, and whether there were new systems put in place, whether there were certain key hires made, whether there was a new mindset that you wanted adopted. Can you give us some of the details behind what you were looking to achieve and what exactly happened?
I think again, when I joined Affirm, we were a very small team, and we were also a team who I think didn't really understand what finance can do to shape the strategy of a business, to shape the long-term trajectory. It was almost a lot of perfunctory work. We'll do a forecast to do a forecast, but no one's going to look at it kind of mindset. And we had to work on that culturally, and evolve from that to we're going to help the business make better decisions by looking ahead at what's going to happen. And to do that, we had to invest in team, we had to invest in tools, but we also just had to change our mindset. I mean, I think the most important thing was to change the framing that a lot of folks had, and I think that's the company had never had anybody with the CFO title before. And so the mindset of people was, I help do financial reporting, and we called it strategic finance, but I think we kind of fell short of that. And so we changed the mindset, and things like tools and process and even the growing of the team comes after that, because you got to start with what you have on the ground. And the team was incredibly strong. I shouldn't be even a little bit dismissive of that. But the team was incredibly bright. They'd hired really well, but probably had the wrong goal in mind. And we worked on that first. We worked on getting the right mindset for what we wanted to build. We worked on working with the rest of the organization to understand what finance was even supposed to do inside the company. And with that, then, increased the expectation of the team, which in turn put pressure on the tools that we were using. Like, again, most early stage startups, we were heavy in Google Sheets and hadn't really adopted any sort of software to help us be more formal. And that came with time. As the bar for our work went up, as the role of what we did went up, the requirements became clear that we needed to grow out of spreadsheets and grow into real financial planning tools. And so we did that. And tools are just that. They're important. They definitely make you work better, but they're just tools. The team that's doing it and the mission behind the organization matters more. The intent of what you're trying to do. I share this story quite a bit, but there's a member of my FP&A team who I had to have endless respect for. And we was early in my time at Affirm, and we went and did a meeting with the executive team, and it went really well, but we were reviewing, outlook on the business, and it was late at night, and I was leaving the office at close to 10 p.m. And he was still working on the same model we had just presented that day. And I was so confused. And so I asked him, like, why are you, it's 10 o'clock at night, man, go home. Like, what are you doing working on the thing we just presented? And he shared with me that he didn't understand before the meeting that what we were working on was really important, that we were actually going to use it to make important decisions at the company. And it was a light bulb moment for him and me. And I think it's a really good lesson for finance leaders. What we do is really important. And if you convince yourself that it's routine or basic, if you convince yourself that I'm just producing a report and no one's going to look at it, then you kind of get a B level output. And by reminding yourself that what you do is really important and actually using it to make decisions for the company, you instill a more intense work ethic that's really valuable to the quality of the output. And again, tools help in that, but they can't replace that. The understanding of what you're doing as being very important is far more important than the tool that you're using.
Was there ever maybe a metric or some number that was in some way misleading, you felt misleading the organization, or you felt that the organization was too focused on it? And I wouldn't use the word sunset, but maybe you decided, can we stop beginning the meeting with this number? Let's end it maybe with that and start with this. I don't know. It seems to me what you're talking about is that you changed the mindset by having hundreds and hundreds of conversations with individuals. The tool didn't do it. It had to do with educating your team and then the team educating the organization. How am I doing?
Yeah, no, I think it's right. But the answer to your question is no. Actually, the level of thinking was and still is really impressive at Affirm. That was like never in doubt. I think there's always quibbles around relative priority of certain measures. And I think that is probably where we've had more conversation in my time here around making sure that we're more balanced in the prioritization across certain measures. But if I look back on the way the business was run 5 years ago when I joined to today, it's largely the same ideas of what we're trying to do. And that is, we care a lot about growing the enterprise. People always talk about the trade-off between growth and profitability. And I think it's just the wrong framing. For us, you have to grow in order to be profitable. This is actually a lesson I learned at KKR is, if you want to create value for the shareholder, doing so with growth is really the only way. You can't just control cost and create value. You've got to create growth, because obviously if you keep your costs relatively flat and you create revenue growth, you can substantially increase profitability versus just marginally increasing it. And so growth has to be important. We measure growth at Affirm with the amount of merchandise volume that we process on the platform, as well as the number of users. And those are really important measures in our business. And because of everything I said above around, we don't have any way to make money in our business without an honest transaction. The unit economics are really important. The way we've talked about unit economics has evolved over time. When we were private, we could talk about it one way. And now that we're public, we have to talk about it a different way. But the underlying ideas have been the same. And fortunately, Max had, I think, done a really good job from day one at the company of protecting the credit outcomes and the unit economics in the business. We were never going to lose money on a unit basis and make it up in volume. And I think that's a thing that a lot of folks can convince themselves that they can just get better over time. And we've always been disciplined on that dimension. And I haven't had to change that really at all. I think the only thing that's been truly new for us is working down the P&L. When I joined the company, we were very comfortable with, a negative operating margin in the business. We were invested for long-term growth. We were out to build something very big, and that remains the thing that we're trying to do. But the additional constraint that, candidly, the equity capital markets have placed on everybody is around delivering profitability more quickly. And so while we still have an eye towards scale in 3, 5, and 10 years out, we're operating within a constraint, and that has been net new, but not net new in its focus, not net new in its existence. Right? We didn't have any sort of brilliant insight, and I think it's a real testament to the kind of people we have at Affirm, where we've got really diligent people who really understand the value of strong unit economics and aren't interested in messing with those. And I think it's important discipline that has served us well. There was a point in time when it didn't feel like it was the right answer when we were in a zero rate environment and everybody felt like there's a chase of growth at all costs. But I think it has served us really well that we were disciplined through that time and stayed focused on delivering strong units despite the kind of froth in the market.
I want to just quickly touch on AI with you. Thank you for that. I want to understand better if you think AI is, as you said, it sounds like a very mission-driven company. As you explained what you understood as you joined the company, it really motivated you. Is AI going to alter the business model in some way? We would all expect you to say that it's going to enhance it, it's going to improve it, but I'm sure there are broader conversations that you've had. What would you tell us?
Yeah, so AI is one of those catch-all phrases I think has a lot to it. Affirm from its founding has been focused on data science and machine learning. Our approach to underwriting has always had a data science and machine learning component. We've never used the word AI to describe it because we really believe it's model-driven and effective model-driven that uses large data sources. But it isn't the kind of thing that we kind of let the AI machine run wild with. We're very careful to think about explainability and controllability of the credit outcomes, and we continue to feel that like that is probably not an area that we're gonna spend a lot of effort on. But the idea of using large language models like ChatGPT in our business is very exciting. It's very exciting for things that may not be obvious on the first surface. It's really exciting for things like conversations with customers. Being able to automate and self-service support is a huge opportunity for us. Scaling efficiently is really important, and so we work on very small transactions, and we don't have huge margins, and so one phone call with the customer service team can be very expensive on a transaction basis. And so everything we can do to help customers, and by the way, our customers don't want to talk to us; they want their problem resolved and they want to understand what's going on. So leveraging that could be interesting to us. Internally, it's very interesting. Like any other company of our size, we've got millions of documents internally, from product specs to memos outlining business decisions, and they're all spread out. And you can use your Google Drive search features, but those are insufficient given the modern tooling that you have. And being able to give people tooling to move more quickly there, I think, is pretty powerful. And then I think we're not doing this today, but I do think it's a conversation for finance more broadly. The creation of so many of our work product in things like our financial filings, our 10Ks and Qs. I really do think we're going to get better over time by leveraging large language models to help automate some of the scripting. It'll never replace the work, but these are all tools that I think make the team a lot more productive. If we're able to have this kind of tooling in our servicing centers, we're able to have this kind of tooling in our finance teams, we're going to find ourselves being a lot more productive because of it.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate that. We're going to jump to our finance strategic moment, where we just ask you for one moment of strategic insight across your long career. You had a few already today, no doubt, but we're just looking for one. Anything come to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
Yeah. So first of all, I think that in general, the work that we do at Affirm, for example, is less about trying to find like these pinpoint aha moments, but more around making like really smart long-term strategic decisions and then living with them. And I talked about late fees of the consumer, and I think that's a good example of that. So I won't talk about things that are like germane to the business, because I think for us those are actually more do the right thing over time, and it pays rewards, even if it's contrarian, especially if it's contrarian. But I do think that the decision that we made to go public itself was a moment of pretty acute aha, if you will. The context is we had just come out of COVID, had just happened. So March of 2020, the shelter in place orders come down, and if you recall, it was not the most optimistic mood on Wall Street. I think everybody was very worried, and we were someone who took credit risk. And so we were looking at our credit risk measures, and we were in, pretty full, all hands on deck, let's manage the business through what we thought was going to be a very turbulent period. And it wasn't but 60 days later that we realized that reaction was while appropriate, it had missed the broader point. Our business was actually thriving in an environment where e-commerce was becoming more a part of how people were going to get the things that they want and need, given our position at the point of sale. And the categories we're in were doubly so relevant for consumers. Our largest merchant at the time was selling exercise equipment at the home, and we were heavy in helping people buy office furniture for their house. And so the tailwinds that happened for us were very, very real. And it was that summer when Max and I were on the phone. Again, we were remote the whole time. We were on the phone, and we were like, is this the time we're supposed to do it? And what we saw was we weren't ready. So everybody talks about IPO readiness. We weren't ready. We hadn't done any work. We had a good business, and we saw an equity capital market that was willing to reward the kind of business that we were. And we said, that won't exist forever. That is a thing that comes and goes. So we're going to go public, but only if we can do it quickly. And we called the banks in July and said, help us put together the IPO process. And they're like, okay, cool. We can start now. We'll list you next June or something like that. And we're like, no, we want to get out before the election. And so they were like, they took a big breath, and they're like, that's not possible. And the mindset that we took on the team was like, we need to go now, because the equity capital markets are telling the market something. They're telling us that the kind of business that we are is going to get funding. And we didn't hit the election window, but we did get out early in January the following year. And it was so important for us because we were able to raise the capital we needed for the business. It also allowed us, because we were public, we did a convertible debt issuance later that year. Between those two things, we put $3 billion of capital into the business. And I look back on it, and the moment and the realization that's so important is there's things you can control and things you can't. You can't control where the market's at in its cycle. That's a thing that is the environment you're operating in. What you can control is how you choose to engage with it. And we chose at the time that we needed to go engage with the equity capital markets because it was constructive. If we had waited a year, the market would have turned pretty materially, and that wouldn't have been on the table. And recognizing the things you can control and you can't, and being humble enough to say, this is an opportunity and we can't change that. That's the game that's being played. That is the way the market is valuing companies, and being humble enough to recognize that you don't control that is the context you have to operate in, and then go take advantage of it. It's a bit like my personal career. It's less about having a specific vision and more around being open-minded to the opportunities as they present themselves. And we certainly did that. And we had along the way 100 reasons why we could have said no. We weren't ready. We didn't have SOX yet. Hadn't hired a head of IR yet. I still had 2 auditors. We had 2 different auditors for the 2 years preceding the IPO, like a big no-no for anybody who's advising you. And we didn't accept any of that because we said, this is a hard thing, but that's what we do at Affirm. We do hard things. We're going to go figure this one out. And it was all because we recognized there was a thing out there that we couldn't control, which was the state of the equity capital markets. And it was our job not to change those, but to play in them and let the market decide, not us try to tell the market.
From episode 916, this is CFO. This is 1 Minute with CFO Michael Cox of Iris Software.
We actually need to start thinking about these acquisitions in a slightly different way. We need to be thinking about, well, how quickly actually can we generate the value that we want to make out of these acquisitions? What revenue synergies do we have? What kind of cross-sell can we do? How quickly can we ramp that up? What sort of changes do we need to make to support management? All of those types of things. We need to be a little bit more aggressive in making sure we get there quicker, because otherwise debt just is ramping up.
Well, thank you for that, Michael. We're going to move to our mentoring round, where we'll ask you several quick questions intended to inform and inspire future finance leaders. We'd like you to think back to that first 3 months you were in the CFO role at Affirm. There must have been something you wish someone had told you as you stepped into that CFO role and all the responsibilities fell on your shoulders. What something you wish, and if you could go back in time, you'd tell yourself?
Again, I think so much, so many things I didn't get right. I think maybe the biggest is my background when I joined Affirm was working with really big companies, large enterprises that were purchased by KKR or Hewlett Packard. These kind of very large enterprises where a lot of the the business processes were quite mature, and they were effective, but they were very corporate-y, if that makes sense. They were very, what you'd expect in large enterprises. And I came to Affirm with a hesitation to be that. I had never worked at companies at this scale point that Affirm was at. And so I had a lot of hesitation with saying, I want to install a quarterly business review process. I want to install a monthly forecasting sync with the business. I want to do these things that I know to be good processes. And I had hesitation because I was really worried about organ rejection. I was really worried about people rolling their eyes at like the kind of private equity guy coming in trying to change things. And that was completely wrong. The company was truly anxious to grow up, and they really wanted the best of what finance professionals can have. And so, the lesson I think is so important there is like, no matter the stage of company, it's probably not too early for you to begin bringing in the things that are really helpful for businesses to operate better, and don't hesitate. Do the right thing no matter what scale point that you're at. And that applies, by the way, on the other end of the spectrum too. The largest enterprises need to be willing to shed bad processes, but the smallest ones should embrace a little bit of more formality. It actually helps you. And I was really hesitant there, and I should not have been.
Michael, we always like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side for us. Is there something generally most people don't know about you?
I think I have like whatever professional ADHD is what you'd like to call it. If you look at my experiences, I really like changing tasks and contexts a lot. And so I always try to keep busy with various things. So, me and my family own investors and help operate a brewery here where I live in Colorado. And I share that because it's a good example. I drink the beer. I don't make it. But I don't work there. I did wash dishes when we opened, but I always like to find ways that are not kind of my day job, not Affirm related, to just go work the brain out on different problems. You'll find me in a lot of other random contexts just because I'm very drawn to that. Whether that's, little miniature coding projects on the side or helping get a brewery going here in my town.
Yeah. How old is the brewery now? Craft brewery, I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a small brew pub. We opened, it's about 8 years old now. 8 years old.
Or were you a brewer, home brewer of any kind? No.
No, I just like drinking it. I think
you're not alone.
I like beer, and again, I share that during COVID, there were so many things that happened to the restaurant industry, and it was this great opportunity to flex a whole different part of your brain. When I was working with, we have a great operator. My brother-in-law operates it, but I would just be there as his thought partner, and to do that and to see that going on was a lot of fun.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. We're gonna anything you've read lately or a book selection that comes to mind for us? Anything?
Yeah. So I don't read. This is not advice because I think that people should read business books. I think they're good. I think that's something that people should do. I don't. I like my time I spend reading, and I read a lot, to be on completely other contexts. I don't like to read. It's escape. So it's but it can be educational escape, or it could be totally just entertainment only. And so, but a book I read recently, which I would recommend to a lot of folks because it's both politically topical, and I think there's a really pretty cool piece of history in it. And it's a book called The Shadow Docket, and it's really about how the Supreme Court uses non-opinion, fully briefed and signed opinions to wield an awful lot of influence over how this country works. And so learned a lot about it, and it's a really cool piece of history, and the kind of thing I think, I think good finance folks should be spending a lot of time thinking outside of the context of finance. I think it makes you better at your job.
Excellent. Thank you for that. We're up to our final question where we'll ask you to look forward finally. We're wondering what your priorities are for the coming 12 months. What would those be?
I feel like we're just in this most exciting time here at Affirm. We've, the past 12 months have been really volatile. The markets have been highly volatile on rates, highly volatile on the consumer. You saw bank failures. You see continued war. It's been a period of pretty peak volatility, and we look forward and we feel like we finally have ourselves in a really front-footed position to go out and focus on the millions of consumers who are using our products. We have a lot of really exciting things going on, launching our Affirm card, and my organization is focused on helping enable all of that growth that's ahead of us. And, I think we've built a world-class finance organization, and now we get to, I think this is the first year where we're really focused on operating and not just building the plane. When we were going public, we were still building so many pieces of the plane, and I feel like we finally have the aircraft fully built out. And so we're going to operate and help the business scale over the next 12 months and help all of the really exciting things going on see the light of day.
Michael Linford, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thanks, Jack.
Hello, Thought Leader listeners. As you have perhaps already heard or even seen, we're now featuring the career lessons and moments of strategic insight shared by our CFO guests as Thought Leader videos. You can now find these videos on our blog at cfothoughtleader.com and, of course, our newsletters, but also on LinkedIn. If you haven't already, please go ahead and follow our CFO Thought Leader LinkedIn company page, and you'll be certain not to miss a single thought leader video debut. CFO Thought Leader, the #1 thought leadership platform exclusively for and by CFOs. As always, thank you for listening.